Okay, let's call this video something like a casual introduction to rhetorical analysis and also some insight into how I conduct class-wide rhetorical analyses in my Writing 102 class, which is Introduction to Academic Writing, and also in upper level courses too. We can conduct rhetorical analyses in class to get a feel for it. So what is rhetorical analysis? It's a kind of qualitative methodology, right? So any academic discipline has a kind of methodology behind it that it's rooted in, or maybe several different viable methodologies through which you can conduct research, through which you can conduct the core search of what it is that you're doing within the framework of that discipline. So we might relate this, if you know anything about literary theory, perhaps, we can kind of relate this. Think of the different methodologies within literary analysis. You can do, say, and some of these are outmoded forms, but nonetheless, or outmoded methods, nonetheless, we can think about, you might learn about in literary analysis and literary theory something like a Freudian analysis, where you look at the psychological composition of the characters. This used to be more in vogue than it is now. You can do a kind of Marxist class critique of the power relationships between individuals in a story. Think about Downton Abbey or something like that, if people still watch that. You have the aristocracy, and then you have the working class, servant class folks, and so you might, through a Marxist critique, talk about the power struggles between those two. Those are methods, right? Or you can do the kind of Jacques Derrida, Derridian deconstructive analysis. Those are quantitative methodologies, right? They're frameworks through which you can analyze the world. And rhetorical analysis uses tools from the discipline of rhetoric to analyze phenomena in the world. Usually we like to do media objects because they're very tangible, so we'll analyze commercials, video commercials. I don't say TV commercials because we know that the global digital advertising spend has surpassed the global television spend. That happened in about 2017. So it's not really accurate to call video-based commercials strictly television commercials anymore. Even campaigns intended for the television are repurposed in digital online video spaces. But nonetheless, we're talking about video-based commercials. So rhetorical analysis is a kind of qualitative methodology, and remember we talked about, okay, essentially there's two types of methodologies. There's quantitative, that looks at data and look at the etymology of those words for a little bit of a hint. Quant, like quantity, data, numbers, you're measuring something. Qualitative, you're looking at the qualities of something. So like ethnomusicology, you might think something like this. You go off, you gather field recordings, you observe subjects, this sort of thing. So how do we conduct rhetorical analysis? I'll put a link to this video here, but I look at one of the examples we use is this Coca-Cola advertisement from their Taste the Feeling campaign, and we have this it's called Brotherly Love, and it features a song. It's a cover of an Avicii, the Italian music producer, a remix of one of his motifs, and then some vocals from some other folks. But it's on YouTube. I'll provide a link here. It's Coca-Cola Brotherly Love from a 2016 campaign called Brotherly Love. So when we're doing rhetorical analysis, we can think about a few things. We can think about the argument. So what is this advertisement? What is this media object? What is this campaign trying to say? What stance is it taking? We can think about the call to action. This is appropriated terminology from marketing and communications. What is it trying to get you to do? Those might be similar, not always the same though. What is it trying to get you to do? Is it trying to get you to buy a product? Is it trying to get you to register for something? Is it trying to get you to change your opinion about a political position or a policy position? What is it trying to get you to do? That's the call to action. Is it trying to get you to go out and buy a Coca-Cola? Yeah, probably. Usually there's some kind of, capital relationship. Now, marketing has changed quite a bit in that a lot of strategy in marketing just tries to promote brand awareness, right? And this is useful in fields like healthcare because you don't see a commercial for a hospital and immediately go out and get knee surgery unless you need knee surgery. It's more to make you aware of the fact that those services exist so that when you do need them, and this is largely a strategy I think that was developed by the Mayo Clinic from what I understand, or refined by them. They have a huge content marketing team. So it's a kind of awareness campaign. And so soda companies can do that all the same, right? I'm sure the Coca-Cola company doesn't just sell sodas now either. I don't know what their whole product line looks like, but they're a large international global corporation, right? So we can look at the argument, the call to action, and then we also like in this kind of casual rudimentary approach to do something like look at how is it arguing to us in terms of ethos, pathos, and logos, which is this classic rhetorical triangle of how we can be persuaded and how we can persuade. So really briefly, ethos, etymologically look at its relationship to ethics. It has something to do with character and quality. If you think about the distinction between ethics and morality, that becomes quite clear, right? Your moral decisions are maybe based on contexts in the world, but your ethics are your composition as an individual. Those are kind of your core values that remain consistent throughout varying contexts, right? If morality is the decision making of how you should act in certain circumstances based on the context, ethics are the values that traverse over time. So character, ethos, we think about character. Pathos, we think about emotion. And you can see the root there etymologically too. It's like empathetic. Pathos, empathy, you can kind of see the pathetic. You see those root connections there and how the word is formed. And then logos, like logic, right? What are the structures within the campaign or the advertisement or the phenomena that we're analyzing that are trying to convince us of something, right? So these are kind of the three classic roots that we look at, the three kind of means of persuasion that we look at if you like to use that terminology. So let's give some examples of those really quickly. Ethos, I always give the example of myself in class, like, I don't just wear a suit coat for fun or because I think it's a representation of my individual identity or something like that. It's because it has a functional purpose in the world. It has these connotations of power and authority, and so that's useful as a teacher. We can kind of poke fun at that, but like look at every male politician at least wearing the suit and the tie, and it's because it has a certain ability to demonstrate to others that you have a kind of caliber of power and position in the world. So that gives you credibility. That grants you ethos. That's a rhetorical tactic that I do and others do to become more credible in the world and to be trusted, right? The doctor with the lab coat, those are really nice, clear examples of character and credibility. Or you might trust a doctor because they have a certain degree, right? They have a medical degree. They're an MD. You might trust a professor because they have a PhD. Sometimes we trust too much, right? Sometimes we take that a little bit too far. Is every medical doctor an expert in every domain of physiology? Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. And is every doctor staying abreast of the latest research in their field? No, there's too much of it, right? So we sometimes put too much weight into the character and credibility of individuals in the world. So that's a nice example there. Pathos, I think, is quite simple to understand. We're very emotional creatures. We tend to think that we're logical creatures. In fact, we overestimate our abilities all the time. This is in psychology, the Dunning-Kruger effect. We overestimate our abilities. We think that we're much more rational than we are. We make a lot of decisions based on emotion. We even make economic decisions based on emotion. This especially happens during economic downturns. People panic sell. They lose hundreds of thousands of dollars in because as soon as they see the market downturning, they sell off. They sell off stocks and index funds and mutual funds, and they go into a panic, and then more of the market goes, the value of these commodities goes down even further, and then more people sell and everyone panics. We make a lot of decisions based on emotion. Now, that's not always a bad thing, though, right? There's no like inherent value judgment about this. Some decisions in life are better based on emotion, perhaps. Decisions between family members sometimes, choosing, say, a life partner or a mate, those can be mixed, right? You might base that in part on emotion, the emotion of love as you understand it, but also on some logical grounds too. It's like, how much debt does that person have, and are they going to be pulling their own weight in a relationship? Those are all kind of, those are, mixed kind of influences that might steer your decision in one way or another. But so we often see advertisements and media arguing through the emotional. Music is a very powerful way to incite emotion in a listener, and we'll look at that in this Coca-Cola commercial too. And then we can also think about logos, like what is the logic here? And we see this especially attempted in political speech very often. It's like, here's some stats about gun violence, therefore we must make some kind of policy decision based on this data. Now, data is not always good, but if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C, right? Logic. Whether or not the underlying propositions are true or false, it's like most people don't seem to care too much. So there you have the rhetorical triangle of ethos, pathos, and logos. And if you think about it as fairly exhaustive, it's hard to find an argument that doesn't play off of one of those three elements. But it is a heuristic. It's just a kind of tool for helping us frame rhetorical analysis, and I don't think it's exhaustive. Especially now we have interesting developments in rhetoric, like we have Ian Bogost talking about procedural rhetoric and how processes and procedures can argue, and how the rules of, say, the structure of software compose arguments that may not be necessarily tied to the ethos, pathos, logos. But nonetheless, it's a nice kind of starting ground. So again, we can think about the argument of a media object, we can think about its call to action, we can think about how it's working in terms of ethos, pathos, logos. We can also think about the ideology behind it. This is part of my own contribution to the field, is bringing in some ideological critique. So what are the assumed system of values and beliefs that are being espoused in a particular media object or commercial that we're analyzing? And then we can also think about the call to action, which I mentioned, is what is it trying to get you to do? To click on something, sign up for something, vote a particular way? Is it trying to get you to buy something, so on, so on. So using that basic framework, we also think about who is the intended audience. This is part of our other rhetorical triangle, rhetoric, text, and audience, this kind of Bitzer situation. And audiences, are well defined, especially with advertising campaigns. It's like the Ford company knows exactly who buys their trucks and which parts of the market they need to increase their sales in, and they know that geographically and across demographics and gender and age and income level. They have all the sales data that they're pouring through and trying to develop specific campaigns that are going to appeal to the markets that they either want to bolster and continue strong sales in, or that they need to increase sales in, say, a declining demographic, something like that. So audience is an incredibly important consideration. It's like, who are you part of the intended audience? Who is the intended audience for this? And because we're not sitting in on those marketing meetings, we don't know all the time exactly, but we can make some pretty good inferences based on how these ads are composed. So now let's look specifically at this Coca-Cola advertisement from 2016. Taste the feeling is the idea. I'll put a link here. But so we basically have a couple of brothers, and one of them gets bullied, and then the older brother steps in, saves the younger brother over the course of this minute-long advertisement. And then the older brother hands the younger brother a bottle of Coca-Cola, And in the backdrop, there's this Avicii remix song. It ends then with the Coca-Cola logo and this new slogan that I don't think that they use anymore. Maybe they still have it in some campaigns, but taste the feeling. So I like to think the argument of this video is something like, if you drink Coca-Cola, you will solidify the bond between you and your siblings, right? Or you will solidify human relationships in your life. That's kind of the argument it's making through the video here. It's showing that people who drink Coca-Cola have stronger bonds and stronger relationships. And in fact, when you drink the Coca-Cola, you can taste how it makes you feel. And the song, Hey Brother, is very, when I show it to my students, they say, oh yeah, that's very like heartwarming and touching. And it's actually, it's a little bit terrifying how much a commercial can make you feel, right? Because it's a soda. There's nothing inherent in the product that has these effects. Rather, the company attempts to argue that Coca-Cola will have this kind of unifying effect. And now marketers are very sophisticated, and they know this. They know that there are certain human universal experiences. So when we analyze this video in class, I'll pose a question like, how many of you have a brother or a sister? And I get about 99% of students raising their hand, because the average U.S. family has, I think, 2.5 offspring in it, right? So almost everyone has a brother or sister. And by the very nature of being alive, you have some kind of family or social unit. None of us live in complete isolation. So that's a universal across human experience. And so marketers know they can play with that, play with those family emotions. And there are a few other universals too, like what is the most uploaded video content on YouTube? It's animal videos, and it has been for a while. People love animals. They have families. You know, you have, say, an orientation towards sexuality. So advertisers use attractive people in their advertisements. And then we all like food because we all have to eat, right? Unless you have some kind of strong aversion or some kind of, say, disorder in that capacity. So those are universals across human experience. We like cute animals and attractive people and tasty food, and we have family and social connections. And so sophisticated campaigns will often play with those universals to mass appeal. I mean, think about the Hardee's commercials where you have like the tall, thin, blonde woman eating a hamburger. That's done on purpose, right? That's not just some coincidence of objects that came together. That's a very calculated type of advertisement. So in the terms of this Coca-Cola thing, so we know the argument. It's like, improve the quality of your life and your relationships to other people by drinking Coca-Cola, even though there's nothing in Coca-Cola that will do that. It doesn't have some magical power to increase your relationships, the quality of the relationships with other people. It works through pathos, right, by showing a kind of emotionally gripping narrative over the course of a minute and by being backed by a very emotionally gripping song. And we can go deeper down, right? And part of what I do in the field of rhetoric is more closely look at how music persuades us, because it's not always emotional. Music is extraordinarily complicated in the way that it can persuade us and of course even just make us feel things. So you could go deeper down. Why is this Hey Brother bit by Avicii or this remix bit powerful emotionally? Like, what about the structure? What about the chord progression? What about the timbre of the vocals? What about the way it's mixed? What about the rhythm of it and the pacing, and how does it connect to the advertisement? What about how, we can also look at the medium, right? So it's a video, but then how is the video constructed? What is the form within the medium? So how quick are the cuts? What kind of post-production effects are put onto the video? What are the actors wearing in the video? It happens that one of the brothers is wearing a red shirt, which is kind of the calling card color of Coca-Cola. So all these sorts of interrelated elements come together to create this argument, which is, solidify brotherly bond or sisterly bond or familial bond by drinking our product. And then the call to action is go buy the product, right? Or at least be aware that the product exists and it could improve the quality of your life if you drink it. And now this is the really preposterous part of it. Again, there's nothing inherent in a bottle of Coca-Cola. It's, carbonated, fizzy beverage with a unique taste, certainly, a kind of proprietary formula, a little bit of caffeine, and high fructose corn syrup. You get a little bit of a sugar buzz and a little bit of a caffeine high there, but that's about it, right? There's nothing inherent in the product that improves the quality of your life. And in fact, if you drink too much of it, you'll drastically decrease the quality of your life through, gaining weight. I think that's a really well-studied phenomenon, as individuals who drink sugary sodas tend to gain weight compared to those who don't. So it's actually perhaps a product that's not good for you, and yet it's being almost certainly not going to improve the quality of your life, and yet it's being presented in such a way as it really deeply improves the quality of your life. The argument here being that you'll actually strengthen one of the cornerstone elements of human experience, your relationships with other people, which is a universal element and something we all struggle with, is creating strong bonds with other people. So quickly and lightly here, this is what we've done. This is a kind of rhetorical analysis. We pick apart a media object. We think about what the central argument is. We think about how that argument is conducted and how it affects us as viewers. And it's just so significant. I mean, with the prevalence of, we live in a kind of, excuse me, like a hyper-advertised culture. You might see thousands of advertisements in a day. Pop-up ads and placement ads in Google, AdWords placements. So even when you search something and you think you're looking at objective information, it's actually, companies are paying to be put in specific spots in that order, to an extent anyway. There's more that could be said about search, but you have sidebar ads and pop-up ads and pre-roll ads in YouTube, and there are billboards and television commercials and radio advertisements and subtle advertising, native advertising that doesn't look like advertising at all. It's disguised as editorial pieces. So we live in a very hyper-marketed, hyper-advertised culture, and it's important to know there's a clear distinction there. What is marketing and what is advertising? Advertising is any kind of paid placement. Marketing is the general kind of communication and brand strategy of an organization. That's the classic distinction between the two. So between marketing and advertising, you're absolutely bombarded by messages in any given day, and a lot of them you might not even know that they're carefully constructed and crafted messages that are arguing something. So that's a little bit of a introduction here to how we might conduct a kind of casual rhetorical analysis, and why it matters, frankly, because there are strong. This is not just used to promote products, but it can be used to promote ideologies, promote political positions, promote, say, religious positions. So to be a free and critical thinker, having rhetorical analysis at your hands is an extremely useful thing to kind of, say, protect yourself in a way by giving yourself the ability to analyze arguments as they're coming at you, and to, in a sense, distance yourself from them and understand how they're working. And they work on so many different levels, so sophisticated, down to, the color correction in the videos and the quickness of the cuts and the type of the music, and all of these elements come into play. So have a good day. This is just a kind of rudimentary introduction to how we might conduct a quick rhetorical analysis. Take care of yourselves, and more to come.